All right, good to see y'all again. I wanted to, we'll just roll right into it. I think a few people probably strolled into, but I wanted to roll into, let's see if I can get this. There we go. Kind of review what we did last week. And then talk about a couple problems that I think some of it I own, but I think just get your impressions on the assignments we kicked out there, and then some of the feedback that I got through that. So we'll start with 140. I got most people's. There's a few stragglers out there, but what were your impressions of that exercise in general? Everybody here do 140? Any thoughts?
I think for me, like, it took me a long time to think about it. Like, I thought it would be harder than it was.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, I felt like it kind of flowed, which was surprising.
Good. Yeah, I was hoping it wouldn't be too hard. I think just put a little thought into it and then can capture the essence of what we got. So I feel like everybody who submitted gave me some good kind of perspective on themselves. Anybody else? I think the reason that was important to me, one, is to get to know you all better. I mean, drawing from that, the thing I pulled, I recognized, which I appreciate, is there's a lot of kind of sensitivity or care towards your peers. There's a lot of kind of organizational skills and so forth. So those common threads, I think, in a way, are what it takes to be a good producer. So I think things that you guys are calling out are the things that matter to me as a producer. So I appreciate what you guys said. Another one was project breakdowns. I think we got through that for the most part just in the session last week, which I was absolutely fine with. And I think the breakdowns in some ways surprised me. Where we kind of fell short was the peer review. And I feel like I own that because I wasn't really clear on where to submit, when to submit. And so for the people who asked me, what about this? I appreciate that feedback. And hopefully I've been able to correct that in assignments going forward. But the general takeaway for me there was, I think I expected things to come up that I didn't anticipate, even in my own exercise. And things that came up were hardware, manufacture, processes like that I wasn't even thinking about, which I thought was cool. I think that was good stuff. So, did anybody look at the other team's sheets but not give feedback? Or did you not look at the sheets?
I wrote some down.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I got a little munched, and I feel like I did get some feedback. So I think one thing that I recognized, I think it was kind of came from your reaction, Lytle, was like terminology, and to me, the semantics and verbiage and what you use. Every company has its own culture, and so that's going to be a thing. There are certain words that I get hung up on, other words that I could care less about, but I think the one was mechanics, which can mean certain things, which I thought was a good thing to call that out. For me, it's systems, or the things that the programmers do is ultimately what I was after there. But I think what you'll find is different companies, you'll have your own vernacular, and it's trying to wrap your head around those, and then even in the roles that you'll be in, steering that vernacular. So any other thoughts with regards to the breakdowns?
I was just amazed at how much we were on with,
Yeah, I think for me that's why it was important to pick such simple products, because as simple as they are at a glance, it's like boom. I think your team had over 100, right at 100 tasks, right? And this is like a game that was built in 1978 or something.
Yeah, it's interesting. one of the rapid prototypes that we did in the first semester of the program was to like do a one-to-one recreation of a classic arcade game, and then after that was done, then we spin off.
Juice it up.
And I remember specifically making like the task board for that and breaking out all of those things for something like Astrals, and it turned out to be like a huge thing.
Mhm.
Yep.
So you guys did Defenders, is that right?
We did this.
Miss Commands, and then I think they did Defenders or Asteroids.
We did a breakdown.
Awesome. So another thing I want to get to, and I don't know that we'll necessarily break it down today, but what kind of experience have you had with naming conventions? What's that?
What level are we talking about? Naming conventions?
Standards for the project, folder structure, data structure, and then ultimately like file. So ultimately, I'm getting at file.
Yeah, I'm the lead engineer on our thesis project, so I took command of basically like folder structure naming and file naming for some things. I tried not to be like too strict about it, but have it, like some kind of structure to it. So one thing that came up with like versioning was just like, hey, we're having a lot of conflicts with these files that a lot of people touch, so if you ever make something and commit it to Git, instead of trying to resolve these really painful headache conflicts, just version it and then look at the differences and then pick out the things just visually instead of like through the command line. So we would name things and just set like a version 1.1, just kind of go throughout. Yeah.
Anybody else? What deep did you get?
Well, Jay Wilson talked about it in our game art class, especially with those design that is.
Did he curse me? Yeah.
I don't remember. He talked about something.
Yeah, I put the hammer down on Gabe, so that goes way back. Yeah, this is stick with
It was good because that was like the first time I've ever heard of it, and then I mentioned it to our local designer on my team, and he was like, "Oh, well, I can, just rename them." I'm like, no, you don't have to do that.
Speaking from a producer standpoint, we haven't had like any sort of training on it.
Okay.
For the most part, we rely on our engineers and artists to essentially establish their own structure.
Okay.
So, for instance, on our thesis projects, our naming conventions were sent out in week 2 by one of our lead artists, our lead tech artist.
Okay.
And that's sort of just what we use. So,
Okay. Yeah, as long as there's someone taking point on it, I feel like the producer should be comfortable in that. I think it takes a familiarity or awareness of the media to do so. But 2, it's not in a vacuum. It's like really negotiating with the team what's comfortable to them. So that's really important as part of the process. If you're not comfortable with it, probably not going to employ those measures. So the team needs to be comfortable with those processes. And if I give any advice, one thing I've found is if you deal with it early, you save a lot of heartache down the road. But until you've maybe faced that heartache, you won't appreciate it. Once you do, and things get disastrous, it's a problem. Maybe what I can do, if there's time at the end of this, I can talk about some of the approaches I've taken with naming conventions. I've been a stickler on that because I paid the price for it. And 2, just mentoring artists at Disney in particular, getting them up to speed early, especially when you get in a file and everything's named PQ2. It's hell to dig through that stuff. So even internally to the files is really important. I think the technical artists are good for that. I think there's definitely coordination with the artists and the tech side, or programmers, engineers to come to terms with it. I think you all should feel comfortable with it. And the reason I want to call that out is in the spreadsheets and breakdowns that people have. I think it's considering, you're starting there, it's just from scratch, but if you establish those names early, they can carry through the whole of the project. And it can eliminate a lot of vagaries and confusion down the road, both in terms of your backlog, the task assignments, common vernacular for everybody, and then ultimately task assignments and the assets, so it can make for a much smoother run. So that's the main thing. Cool. Let's see. Next, so this week we're going to talk about feature stories or user stories and epics. How comfortable? I think you've probably done a bit of that, but how comfortable are you with the notion of stories? Which is good because I put a lot of emphasis on that this week. And then epics, does that even mean anything to you?
Like Gilgamesh?
Yeah, it could be, I guess. Yeah. So just real quickly, and then we'll get into the details on this. With user stories, I found it's a really effective way to encapsulate what a task is, and we'll break down how to structure those. There's a pretty common convention there, which is once you've done it a few times, which we'll do today, makes it really approachable. And then epics. So a user story is something that can be done in a day or within a sprint. An epic is something that crosses multiple sprints. So maybe 2 sprints. That's where you start getting into the epic territory, which is just a bigger task. But ultimately, you want to break that down into more finite user stories. That's the highlight of that.
Are we talking literal stories or?
No. These are tasks and stories associated with those tasks that help whoever needs to convert on those tasks has a better understanding, or at least a conversation based on the task versus just a simple word. Backlogs, we'll touch on that a little bit. Ultimately, next week is when we'll really dig into backlogs based on user stories. And then we'll hit a simple Gantt chart, which we'll get into what the value is of that and how that can help you. And I'll just say this, Gantt can be massive and super complex, and there are a time and a place for that, and they can be simple, and we'll keep it simple. Cool.
So to clarify, then the Gantt chart is using like a waterfall approach.
Yeah, it's just here's the projected timeline for the whole of the project, start to finish, all the tasks. Here's what it's going to do, and so you see that kind of cascade-ish.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only reason I like hesitate is because, like, I just regularly hear that, like, we should move away from waterfall as an approach. So it's just, like, caught me off guard.
Yeah, I think the thing, and we're not going to spend a lot of time in that methodology, but I think to have the awareness, because what you'll find is you'll get in with a company, and that's what they do, and there's maybe this temptation to go into Scrum, but they're not comfortable with it. I think last week I used the analogy of, here's the CEO of the company, he started, he's been doing it this way for 20 years. What do you mean we got to do it another way? This works. And then ultimately it gets into, at the end of the day, they just want information. How do I get that information out in productivity? And so those old methods still hang on, especially with the old guard. And so having an awareness and comfort with them will allow you to progress into more modern territory. All right. Yeah, I won't belabor it, but I think it's good. Okay, so just a quick recap. We talked about the assignments, submissions. I've set up folders in Google Drive with submissions for each week's assignment. So that should make it a lot easier. The templates are also there, and then also in Canvas for each task, I've set a specific task assignment within Canvas, so that should make it a lot clearer. Where I think last week I had the breakdown and the peer feedback all in one task, so hopefully that makes it a lot simpler. It's not like, I don't think the tasks are really that heavy. I think it'll take a little bit of time. Some of them I expect, like last week, we'll be fully through them today, which is great. I think then we can take, like the stories, take a little bit more time to prep for the Then I wanted to touch on a couple of things. So with the breakdown, I think the reason that was important this week or last week was from there, whether it's Cascade or Kanban or Scrum, if it's Extreme Program, whatever, that breakdown can feed any of those systems. So I think regardless of what approach you take, that's the kernel and start with any of those approaches. And then Lytle and I had a quick conversation that's still up on the board about Kanban. She'd asked me a couple questions, so I just wanted to float that back out to the team. I'm gonna jump over here. So, who here understands Kanban? Comfortable with it?
My last job called the office supply station Kanban.
All right, we'll get into this deeper next week, but since I covered it with some of the group, I want to kind of expose it to everybody. And it's just another form of Agile, and it's a very simple form. What I've found is it's really effective when you're prototyping. We have the collective focus is always constant improvement, not necessarily a time-boxed experience. This is just get it done next, make it better. And so, so it's really team defined, and what I found is a simple approach is the things to do. That's number one column. So post-its work really well for this. It's nice because it's usually very visible to the whole team. Generally, it's a small team, so it's not a problem to have that visible and in people's face. And you got to post it, and take it, and move it to doing. So whoever owns that. So that's the second general column of the scene. So it's just this progression to done. And so what you might find is in your Scrum, or your stand-ups, you're talking about to do, doing done, that kind of stuff. But Kanban really is a simple way to break that down into the things in action and the things out the way. And so that's at its essence. If the team decides they need another feature, like here's our backlog, we need to see that differently than things that we're going to do, you might break it out that way, but ultimately it's just as simple. All right. And I already talked about naming conventions.
Real quick, we've been using that since prototyping, first term, and they never told us it was called So we're familiar with that concept.
Okay.
No idea.
That's where it comes from. It actually, I believe it comes from extreme programming, which is a form of Agile, I believe. So don't quote me on that, but I think the history comes out of that form of Agile. And just, again, it's a simple way for the focus, when the focus is about quality versus some time box, hey, we got 2 weeks to do this. It's just there's always stuff in play and action. So that too, I think, could apply to something that's like software as a system or a service where there's always releases. That may be another area where it becomes a fairly viable approach. Cool. All right, let's get down to business. So features and user stories. We talked a little bit about it. What's your impression? Like you thought, is this an actual story, like design, or anybody here have familiarity with this story?
Yeah, as far as I understand, it's framed so that whoever the player is or the person experiencing what you're making, it's framed around them so that you're always focused on delivering that experience, and it's not about like making this little feature which might not even touch or affect them. And I think that's the purpose, just to keep the focus on your player, or the person who's using your product.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a good synopsis. I think it's that who, and we'll dig deep on that today. And then it's the what, and I think I broke it down. So the what is that feature, and we talked about epics just a bit ago. The what can be pretty massive. Ultimately, with these stories, you want to whittle it down into a very finite, actionable, day task, right? Certainly within a sprint task. That's what you want with these. So you become very functional. Anybody else have any questions on that? So I basically threw down the formula here. And this is really what it is. As who I think you described as the player, that's a good example. As the player, I need, give me something, anybody.
To move my character.
to move my character so that,
Feel in control.
okay, that works. So it really can be that simple. That doesn't give a lot of definition and clarity. Ultimately, by the end of this class, we'll be able to put something that becomes tangible and actionable. That's essentially it. It's like the who, so that I can do what, and so give purpose to it. And let's move to the next. So why do you think we need these? If you haven't used them before, do we need them?
So you don't just design for yourself. I think it's a really easy, you could be designing for yourself, and your player, like, you might represent the persona that you're designing for, but a lot of times you're not. So breaking this apart just makes that distinction really clear.
Yeah, that's a great reason behind that. Anybody else? Thoughts? Too soon?
I guess personas are really useful because it created a new vision and it breaks the what I want. It creates more like what my client or my audience wants. It helps visualize like how that person kind of thinks. So if you say, oh, I'm dealing with children, but what kind of children, what age? Is it a girl, is it a boy, is it both? So creating a persona helps visualize your audience and understanding better their needs and what they like right now, what they don't like right now. So it helps to polish your ideas and your products better.
That sounds good. How much of personas fed the designs you guys are currently chasing in the program? Is it part of the mix? Zero?
We've never talked about personas in our team.
Okay. All right. I've had exposure to it before, but it was in a vague space. Working at CastAR, it was front and center. And even there was some confusion, so I'll talk about that. But what I found was, as part of Scrum, it's very informative. As part of like keeping focus on the product, it's very informative. And I'll just fold out the rest of them. So there's a couple methods here, but it's that consistency. It's like able to wrap your head around this identity. It's not ourselves. We become too attached or become too myopic if it's just ourselves. But this maybe not. It's not abstract, but a more finite, believable persona, person, character, user, player, whatever, that we can wrap our heads around and develop to that characteristic. So in that, I think it removes the personal bias, so we're not so attached to it. It gives a bit of a separation, and it's not personal because it's not someone else within our team either. It can be very relatable to us, but not necessarily us directly. And so that gives us kind of this buffer I've found within the team as well, where it's like animosity or competition between individuals that may still exist, but the personas allow you to separate that out from the politic per se. There's still going to be arguments. It's like, well, this is the right persona, so that's still going to go on. There's a chance.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a really great way to focus the conversation, because then you're not a moving target. You know exactly who you're making it for and why you're doing it. It's not like, because I know like in our team we've had like issues come up where people say like, oh, well, I think this feels better, and someone else is like, well, I think this feels better. But knowing, like who it feels good to, like this person, Josh, that kind of gives an answer to that, so you don't like have this back and forth with this ill-defined target.
Yep. That's a good one. I think in that vein too, it's like we as individuals working together, we get to know each other. But there's something about a persona, one, that separation with the definition. Once it's become kind of fixed in people's minds, even if it changes over time, it's like, wait a minute, this is kind of the wrong, tweak that persona over time. It's not like they need to be absolutely rigid and fixed and there's no modification once created. But that persona becomes this whole definition of what you're looking for in the product and the reasons behind it, encapsulated in one word. It's Josh's, like Josh, what Josh needs, what Josh wants. And so with that simple term of the who of Josh, people have it in their minds like, oh, this is his personality type, character type, motivations. This is why the product needs that or needs to avoid that. So with a single term, you've encapsulated all these parameters in association with the product. And that was one thing that was like an aha moment to me as far as the value of them. So that's where I'm coming from there.
You know, one thing that's pretty interesting that I didn't see anybody using here, but I use in the company in Brazil, is that we actually have two personas per product. One of them is the main persona, and the other one is like the persona you don't want to unplease, but you don't necessarily going to go for their preferences, and that helps a lot to create like a broad kind of audience, but limited at the same time.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's a good talking point. Is how many is enough and how many are too many, and I think there's a team realization, and I think what we're going to do today is kind of divide up into smaller groups, but to develop some personas, and I'm just going to limit it to 3. But in that, I think depending on the product and the title, you probably have anywhere, maybe you could even have on a huge marketing project, maybe a dozen different personas. And something that's more small and finite, maybe 1 or 2 can cut it. If your company has found that our market is so niche that hey, this is the personality trait of the target audience, one may cut. And then I think having that example, like Kelly mentioned, is there's a secondary. Hey, they're not our primary audience, but they're the secondary, maybe of value to them. Consider that, so you're not blocking off potential. And there's a risk in that too. There's another form, and I think this gets confused, especially when you start talking about marketing. There's I think I wrote it down. I hope I wrote it down. It's like a marketing segment or something like that. And really it's a group of people as opposed to an individual. And this is where I really ran into trouble with an experience with personas and kind of a misappropriation of really what that meant and how it was being employed, where in truth it was more a marketing segment. So a category of people, and we ended up having, I can't go into the details right now because they're still working on it, but there were 3 classifications of people and target audience. And 1 was, we want the kids. And 2 was, we want the adults. And 3 is, we want the tweens and teenagers and pre-adult. And it's like this, okay, you want everybody? And so it became its place, but in our case, I think we would have done better with an actual persona, an individual, more fundamental person. Does that make sense? I already talked about ethics, so I think I already answered that one.
What stage of development do you guys usually end up making personas?
That's a good question. So for me, I think you've got your breakdown. When you start moving into backlog and assembling that, that's a good time for it. Anytime you're looking to make a task actionable, that's a good time for it. As we get into backlog management, do you guys understand the difference between a Scrum Master and a product owner? Like Scrum product owner? So I'll break that down. And we'll go over this. I think we can't hit this enough because I think it gets kind of muddy, and we'll hit it more detail next week. But when we talk about epics, I feel like, or stories, user stories, everybody on the team should be able to compose those. And I think it goes not just to the product, but hey, I need this tool. And you've got your tech artist, and you can have their own backlog, but having a little bit of meat on that bone of here's what it is. If they don't get to it for 2 months, and then what's subterfuge? I don't know. They won't have, and you may have forgotten what you meant by that, right? But whatever term you use, the user story gives some definition to it in a light cost way, so that if it's 2-3 months down the road before we actually get to it, there's enough there to go on or refresh your memory versus some single term or word or phrase. That's what I need. And so there's something about that as a memory jog that works. So with regards to Scrum Masters, is that familiar to people? Fairly? All right. So Scrum Master is the one who's tracking all the progress. They're representing the team. Ultimately, the Scrum Master, that is their role to protect the team, represent the team, and they work then with, in a pure system of Scrum, the product owner. The product owner is more the representative of the stakeholders. So there's some muddiness there where that product owner may be kind of on the fence, where they're still looking at the team and what they need, but ultimately they're there to ensure that the product that the stakeholders are in for and signed up to receive is what they're going to be able to deliver. The Scrum Master is informing on the progress, the status, and the issues it's not like the Scrum Master isn't talking to stakeholders either, but ultimately it's their job as a Scrum Master to defend the team in the work and the risks associated with the project that they're pursuing. The backlog tends to be owned by the product owner. So they're helping choose what the priorities are in that backlog, and for them, a majority of the user stories may actually come from the product owner. And so in that's their way to help prioritize it. I don't know that we'll get into it today, but there's this whole scale system or multiple systems approaches you can take to giving priority on a task, being able to prioritize it in the backlog. That's the product owner's job, is to prioritize that backlog. What I've found a lot of times is, and I think this is in a pure Scrum system, what I found a lot of times is you got to wear multiple hats. So the Scrum Master may be the product owner, and vice versa, and maybe the lead designer is the Scrum Master. So I think in reality and truth, we tend to wear multiple hats, but ultimately, whoever's managing the backlog should probably be very comfortable with user stories and then point systems to help prioritize that. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Good? Cool. Okay. Got a couple notes here. I want to make sure I hit them. Okay. So, sorry, just fumbling a little bit. I think that covers it. So this little template here, I just busted this out in Lucid Press. Lucid Press, yeah. You familiar with that? Doesn't really matter. You can use a cue card if you want. You can use a spreadsheet. I set up a template in Sheets for this, and that's what you guys are going to run with today. But I just busted this out pretty quickly, but it's hitting some key tenets, right? So it's the name is important, picture identity is important, some catchphrase or quote from them kind of adds believability, I think, to them. It's not just clinical. Then you get into their the main details of like this one, like what we're going to do today. We aren't going to get into this detail, but like personality traits, their psychology, etc. You can go into real depth with these. What I've found is there's the data-driven personas, which you do in market research. You're talking to people, you're getting all these data points, but then you collect that and formulate that into informing what a persona is. What we're going to do today is more an assumptive or assumed persona, where we'll pull it out of thin air, but based on a couple key parameters, you'll kind of assemble those as your best guess for what that person may be.
Okay, so I have somewhat of a background in human-centered design, and this is like key to that, like designing around someone. And I remember like one of the big things we always talked about was like crushing assumptions. So like when you talk about like pulling something out of thin air, I think that makes total sense for like an exercise, right? But then that just like immediately like red flags go off in my head, and so it just makes me wonder like how would you address that? Like you said, data driven. Would you like do surveys and try to do that, or what?
Yeah, I think an assumed persona works really well for, we don't have time to do the research, we get to that, but we need to move on something, be a little more informed, and give us that kind of separation from the team. So it allows, that assumed persona allows you to move on something. And then those personas just count on them evolving over time and being more informed based on the data received. But you shouldn't feel like we can't move because we have to do all this data research, you know. So it gives you that latitude to move. And if you go so far as to do that market research, then you'll get there, but you can move in between in anticipation of that data.
Cool, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be risky. I think the other thing is you can get all this data and it can just blow your whole curve, right? It's like, well, why are we developing for? So it can be overwhelming too, and just all the information. Yes, okay.
And like before, we did like several ways to work with personas. One of them was actually going to field and like interviewing with people. That would like take forever.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, since we work with games, at least the company that I worked with, it was pretty easy. So like we set I don't know, you want to make a dinosaur game or a panda game for children. So they would go to like Google Apps. There's a website called App Annie or something like that. It shows all of the data of the users from that kind of games. So you just like check the whole data from like what are the games that they download the most, what are the ads that they just skip and like ignore and this kind of stuff. So we would create a persona based on the data that App Annie would give us. And this is not like as time consuming to take like 1 day to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's, you know, whether it's Google Analytics, Microsoft Analytics, there's a lot of information out there that we can get access to and use that to inform some of those decisions. I think I'm amazed at how big a deal it is, companies dedicating themselves to not being the ones who are creating the analytics, but receiving that analytical data and packaging it up for a company so they can digest it. And so it's not just an individual within the company that's doing all the analysis, but the company's dedicating themselves to that. And it'll be interesting to see. It's such a huge thing right now. There's several of these companies around the valley, but I think in time, even that, where the algorithms give us the metrics, ultimately I can see, even though it's really complex now, the work that these companies are doing will also become obvious because the trends will become so clear and understood that they'll be able to compose really digestible information much easier through formula versus individuals. The product owner I mentioned earlier, many times they tend to get into that role of analytics. They do the analysis, they do the reports, that kind of thing. So a lot of times you'll see product owners wear that hat to being able to process the data and put that in formats digestible for the team, stakeholders, and vice versa.
There's some databases with ready personas that you can just fix them and get it. That's pretty useful too.
Okay.
If you don't like creation.
Send us a link or a reference. Can you do that? Awesome. Okay. Anything else before we dig in? All right. So I've got a link here. This was pretty informative, I thought. It's just a blog, but it kind of breaks down personas and creation. So I thought it was pretty informative. It's one approach, but that's one that you can use well. All right, so we'll divide up into 3 teams. And what I wanted to do, I'm kind of putting a twist on this. Instead of it just being consumer, think about internally who the persona is of, here's the artist, here's the programmer, and what do they need because some of these features that we're talking about maybe aren't necessarily, maybe not in the examples we've got with the products you guys broke down last week, but you'll find, like for me directly, working with technical artists, like I described, it's like, I need this thing, they don't understand why, they're not going to be able to get to it yet, and I compose user stories for these so that, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months down the road, it's like, what was that thing you need? Here it is. Oh yeah, and then we could talk about it. Whereas on other occasions, I just had, I need this script, but I didn't have the why. And it's like, is that still important? I don't know. Think about it. So there's some intent that was lost by not having that at least robust enough node industry for that person. Two, I think as producers, it's dealing with all these different talents and traits and personalities, and it's hoping this can help you better wrap your head around what does a programmer need, what are his motivations, and vice versa. What about the artists? What are their motivations? And so in a normal scenario, we probably would be focused more on the consumer side with the persona, but for this exercise and just what we're going to be doing through the rest of the workshop, I figured this would help inform some of the decisions we make now. Cool. All right. I don't know what TBD means. So we're going to divide up into 3 teams, kind of mix it up a little bit compared to what it was last week, so it'll be a little different, but try and mix it up well. And then pick the coder, artist, and the user. And then I've got this template here that we can run from. And the details are a little different than the example I showed, but this should give you something to run on. And I believe this is shared now, so I think I posted in Slack, so the whole group is available. And just kind of hitting some of these. If in demographics, I think there's the key ones like what's your role, title, etc. You start getting into some of the other things like, well, they don't drive. That's a data point on an individual. So kind of have some fun with it, decide what this personality would be. But think about it in terms of the products we broke down last week. It's like we're talking about these arcade games. Who does this apply to? Who would find value in the products that we broke down? And try and consider that as you develop these personas. Cool.
So this is Lester McGee. He's a 28-year-old computer programmer from Chicago. He's a fan of the Chicago Bears.
Yes.
What is that?
Did you like the couch or the socks?
He likes the Bears.
No,
He sticks to the Bears. As you can see with
He's a member of the church choir, so that's one of the things that he likes to do. We actually went off of a lot of this inspiration came from Google image search. We just came up with a name, typed that in, and then found a person and started to profile them. It's kind of creepy actually. I'll let one of you guys continue.
So keep going on his demographics, graduated, and then he's been working in the industry 6 years. He's currently a software engineer for mobile. And his favorite things to do in his spare time, at least professionally, are being on Reddit, Git, and Stack Overflow. He also owns a 2004 pale gold Camry, which is actually up on my computer right now. If you guys want to see it.
Oh my god.
This is the power of the internet, people. Don't put your name up there.
That's Lester McGee's car? Oh my god.
So as far as traits, he focuses really well on one task, and he knows a lot of programming languages because he's a programmer. But he likes to play a lot of mobile games and some of the harder, indie games that came out for PC. But he's very introverted and blunt, and defensive and confident. He knows what he's doing. He's upset with people. Don't think he knows.
Yeah, he tends to have tunnel vision in the workspace, so he just kind of plugs into what he's doing and works way at it. When he comes into the job, his wants and needs are PC with fast internet, things that he can't live without is his Fidget Cube and his Samsung Gear VR.
All
Do-
mobile.
Doesn't he likes to do some Arduino programming at home, smart home automation, and he doesn't play Minecraft, but he does like to build things. It's not really he like to build machines.
So like you'll see those like working Game Boy emulators in Minecraft. He does stuff in his spare time.
If he doesn't need
Nope.
No.
Okay. Nice work. Who's next?
We can go.
Sure.
One of you.
This one. Did you download one of
I
them?
have
Or?
my battery.
It should be right there.
You just go.
Where are you
Yep.
doing?
Cool.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
All right, so that was Coder.
Yeah.
Got an artist. Right.
We got the artist. That's right. So we're working with Rose here. She is a 20th-year-old fine arts student. You know, she's got a lot of attention to detail. You know, she likes to really get the nuances of something down because the life comes out with those details. But she also is really into foreign films and likes to speak French. She's pretty extroverted, likes to meet people, cheerful. She's like pretty aware of her social surroundings, but her desk is really messy, like all the time. So if, you know, like you might hear her say, it's not a mess, it's inspiration. So it's Rose. You guys want to pick up from there?
Sure. Which one do you want to choose?
I don't think
Okay. I'll do launch the memes. So she does digital and physical painting. So she needs brush, camera, bottles, canvas, easel, external drives, Photoshop tablet. She likes to play with Play-Doh and sketchbooks. Those are her kind of free time things. People, she needs lots of people actually. Head models, art models. She likes to be appreciated for her work, so people who tell her that is always good. Significant other, family, friends, that sort of thing. Hobbies are laser tag. I didn't know about that.
Go on. Brings her own gun.
Yeah. She likes to paint well too. How about that? Photography, traveling, dancing. She's a concert goer. Her art inspirations are primarily Renoir, Caravaggio, Van Gogh, and
Well, it's hard to tell, but she's a fine arts student. She's 23 years old, and she's a freelancer, so she does hand-painted stuff for gallery and games. She doesn't make a lot of money though. She rides the bus. She has a part-time job at a cafe, and she spends some time on the studio, so like just doing random stuff or painting people. She has Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. She spends a lot of time in Pinterest, and she has like this group of people that she interacts a lot, that goes to concerts and these school groups. She has a bike, and by bike it's bicycle, and she has a family heritage from Spanish. I know. So.
You're up.
Good job.
Leave the list and the bones. I like this it's only one that's expensive though. She doesn't have money, so she's also money, so she's like.
She doesn't like
Okay, so I think here we have the soulmate to Rose. This is Flame Tips McMouth Crust. So we'll start with his demographics. So he's a professional taste tester for experimental fast food items. So, you know, like in Alabama, they have like that one KFC store or whatever where they just like try out all the like disgusting, horrible foods that they just come up with. Like there's like hot dog in pizza crust and stuff like that, and like macaroni and Dorito, whatever. 42 and a half years old. He's been eating for 42.25 years. He started his career, so you know, like there's a lot of misshaped chicken nuggets, but there's bound to be like those really horrible ones that are just like super mangled and like no one should put that in their body. He had to like pick those off the assembly line or whatever. So that's how he started his career. Every day he has to go to work. He checks job. That is the first thing he does. He only uses 2 websites, or not like websites, but just sort of networks to like connect with people. So Christian Mingle and Meverse. So, because like he likes to see, like he likes to imagine people with big heads. So he bought a 1-to-1 like scale like replica of the Mystery Machine, you know, like as a car, and it was like all painted and done up, like just from like a city auction. But then he painted like a wolf on the side of it with like howling at the moon. Looks great. So to get to Christian Mingle, he Googles Bing, gets on the Bing, and then he Bings Christian Mingle. So go ahead, Mike.
Sure, I'll do one to me. So he has to have his wooden sport, and he has his flavor dust nail pick for when he's taste testing food, and his nails get kind of gross, and he needs to have to pick it out. And he also has to have his 1-to-1 Pepto-Bismol with Reds.
Red's apple ale.
Helps the stomach after eating a lot of food.
Is it the Wicked Res that you like that?
Yeah.
Just the regular.
The Wicked, yeah, for sure.
The toys he likes to play with, he's got his rusty trusty Easy Bake Oven, his Elite Fidget Spinner, and of course the Shrinky Dink.
So I should say the Elite Fidget Spinner, it's got ceramic bearings. He painted it to look like the Mystery Machine.
People in his life, he's got Rose's RuneScape character, and his lifelong rival Ronda Rousey. He likes to pose in front of the mirror at his local UFC gym, and he really wants to revamp the Spike video game efforts.
Some of his traits, he's the guy that can fit most amounts of food in his mouth. So anything that, you know, those types of contests, those types of, you know, eating competitions, that's the dude who can put anything in his mouth. Convinces anyone to give him their leftovers, hairstyles that resemble dehydrated food stuffs.
So like ramen is involved. Like I think this just sort of maybe looks like a chow mein.
Tantrums, loud, prefers to walk while eating. Excuse me. Talk while eating. So not necessarily just, you know, being quiet or holding on. He will go get a burger. He can't talk to you. Too worse. So drunk. Aware of 1 foot radius around his head unless a neon object appears in his line of sight.
So like, you know, like beer, it's like that. Like generally like the silhouettes of women he'll see sometimes.
Krispy Kreme son.
Krispy Kreme time, for sure.
Even his beard. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Okay. Are the characters believable?
So like, no.
I give it a solid 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
2 out of 10.
It's funny though, because the more specific they get, the more believable they are.
Yeah.
Get relatable. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Cool.
The user, is that supposed to be like a player?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The consumer.
Just
Yep. Not drugs.
drugs.
Yeah. What was the hardest part about this?
We had different ideas of what the person was, so meshing that, but I think it actually helped at the end because it helps you get multiple sides of people that way.
You know, it was great once you like really tried to get into the details of the person, like when Brian joined our group, he like thought of a great thing where we were trying to think of people in this guy's life, and so Brian brought up rivals, where we just thought of like people maybe he liked or enjoyed. We didn't even think about the opposite of that. So just think holistically about a person. every issue.
Totally, actually, that was one thing that I really liked about what you guys did was like you highlighted some of the things that like weren't so good about the person. You know, like he gets like tunnel vision, something like that, and understanding those parts like brings that person to life more too.
Anything else?
Finding his car was pretty hard.
Hardest part, not committing felony identity theft. Most difficult thing for us.
I think so. I think this is good for me. This works. I think the key point is it's not something you do in isolation. I think the team has to be able to wrap their heads around it. I think in a normal scenario, it would be the whole team coming together on it and making this happen to ultimately result in personas that you can relate to, buy into, and appreciate.
So what would the personas for the engineer and artist be used for? Is that the type of person that you're going to go recruit?
Yeah, that's where we're kind of taking a little bit of liberty here,
Sure.
Because I want you to be able to draft stories with not just the consumer in mind, but even internally. Because I found there are tasks that come along that even as producers, and especially as producers, it's being able to relate to other dispositions, other priorities within the team, because not all stories are going to be consumer facing. I think there's value to have those even internal to the team. So it's like, why in the hell does he need physics? It's like, here's why, and this is why it's important. So I think it's being able to kind of turn it inside as well as outside. I think in a normal scenario and in general application, people are thinking about the consumer. The scenario I described with the technical artist, that was real. It's like I needed to capture something quickly that I knew he wouldn't be able to touch, and we were already in that mode. So I just busted out a couple of stories, and a couple months later, it's like, oh yeah, that's what that was. So I found it was actually useful.
Do you think you could elaborate a bit more, like what the story was that was internal?
Yeah. So I was working actually with Ian Gilmore. I don't know if any of you have taken classes from him. So teaching technical art, and we were working on a digital asset management system at Disney, and it was really complex. The artists used it. It was just integral to the pipeline, but it didn't mean that they liked it. They had a lot of problems. And so for me, I was always on the lookout for, and it got to the point where early on I was hands-on. More as I got into more and more management, it was just over the shoulder. But I would be watching over the shoulder, and someone would have their workaround. Workaround isn't a solution. So for me, it was like, what are you doing there? Why? And instead of burdening them with, here, and I've got to write a report, I'll give it to Ian, it's like, let me capture the essence of what you're doing. So it allowed me to boil it down into something that I could then prove was relatable. In that case, it wasn't a persona per se, but I think it's important. Like, I'm not a programmer, but I've written task requests of ultimate stories that were very programmatic in mind and intent. And so I had to put myself in that headspace of, why is this important in this program? And so that's why I said, let's take a little detour on what we normally do with personas and attack it.
So it sounds like there was like tools being made for the team so that the product could be made.
Yep.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So now let's move on to stories. Now you get your chance. If I can find my presentation again. Okay. All right. So that one's in bag, and this is something that I think earlier is better. It doesn't need all the burden that we've talked about, but the more information you have, the better. It's a team effort. And then ultimately, it can evolve over time as you realize, oh, wait a minute, this isn't even our market or target. You can make changes, so don't feel like it's rigid. But you want something that's relatively fixed so that you can count on it and return to it. So, All right, next. Now we're going to do user stories. So I already broke down the formula. It's the who, the what, and the why. And you're basically composing a single sentence that says, I as, what's his, McFadden, what was his name? Is that your guys? McGee? Yeah, so I as this individual need, and then let's look at our backlogs for products that your team's composed. And the thing I think that's key is pick some features that are on your task list. The breakdown that we did last week. Kind of pick 3 each, like each person pick 3 tasks, and then compose a story from those tasks you've picked that meet each one of these personas. Does that make sense?
So we're talking about from the task list that we picked.
Yeah, so your breakdowns last week.
Okay.
Pull tasks, each individual pull 3 unique ones, don't do the same ones. Pull 3 tasks from there, and then write or compose stories per. And if we want, we can pick one and just kind of play with it, kind of work through that system, so that you get enough information on what that story encapsulates. So let me pull one up.
Okay, bye.
Well, yeah, because we're back to the teams that we made the task list for last week.
Oh, we are.
Are we?
That's what it sounded like.
Yep. So.
Okay, Kristen, I got it. You don't have to be with us.
Okay, so that's valid.
Get out of here.
Come back to
Alright, so we're meant to be in the same teams as we were last week.
Yeah, and if not, like Brian, I don't think you're here, so feel free to jump in. It's not so important to me that you're sticking to that team, but at least picking one of those breakdowns and plucking tasks from that, and then using the personas we came up with today to use as the lead. So I've got the Pong example that I did last week. Let's say I need, what's the feature? We'll pick one. This gets a little bit like, what do I need, right? Let's pick, we'll go with the coder with a numeric font, and then the Y. So I as, what's his name? Let's figure it out.
Mickey.
I as McGee. What's that?
Lester McGee.
I as Lester McGee need numeric font. So let's say he's the programmer who's doing the task in the game. Dependent on an artist for that font. I, Lester McGee, need a numeric font so that I can display the score on screen for players. It's fairly simple and straightforward. Does that make sense?
So are we doing all 3 personas or just the one that we came up with?
Do all 3 personas. So tap into each one of those with 3 individual tasks. So this is an individual, everyone's doing their own instead of doing it as a group thing. Like you each kind of come up with your own user stories. And then we'll talk about it. I don't expect this to be done today. So I think at least take a stab at one, and we can take the others offline. And then before we wrap today, I definitely want to crack open the page.
Okay, so we're not doing these together.
No, doing them individually. So just pick your tasks and start breaking it down.
Who wants what? So we're sticking to
We were?